You know those moments in old movies where the music swells and suddenly everything's in slow motion? That's what last Friday felt like. Same boring staff meeting, same predictable cast of corporate losers, then bam, he walked in. Alex, consultant hotshot, or whatever they call those smooth-talking vultures these days. And cliché of clichés, my eyes zeroed in like he was a life preserver and I'd been drowning in Paul's apathy for months. Of course, I told myself this was all in my head. I mean, I'm not the type to get flustered by a handsome face and some witty banter. Yeah, sure, maybe my marriage wasn't exactly a fireworks display lately, but come on. Except then there was the project. Alex and me, supposedly working side by side. It started harmless enough, professional even, until it wasn't. A late night in the office, only us and the hum of those awful fluorescent lights. He offered to walk me to my car. You see where this is going, right? We talked, like truly talked, not the half-hearted. How was your day? Nonsense at home. And something shifted, an accidental touch of hands, a shared laugh that seemed to hang in the air. My heart did this stupid little fluttery thing. I hated it. The worst part? The text started. Jokes, at first. Just silly inside stuff about work that made those long, empty hours bearable. Each notification buzzed like a guilty secret. Maybe Paul's cluelessness was rubbing off on me because somehow, those stupid texts started to feel less like a bad idea and more like, well, a lifeline. Our lunches, those so-called work lunches, morphed into something else. The conversation strayed, and it felt risky, exciting, and so damn wrong. Then it happened. The brush of his arm against mine under the table. My stupid brain short-circuited. I didn't pull away, and just like that, some invisible line got crossed. I know, I know. This is the part where everyone rolls their eyes and whispers about the bored. Neglected wife falling for the first smooth talker that comes along. Trust me, I'm gagging right along with you. But there's something about messing up your perfect little life that feels weirdly satisfying. At least for a while. The thing about lying, it gets easier. Shameful, I know, but after the awkward breakfast with Paul, him rambling about some sports thing, me practically vibrating with nerves. The second lie, the third, they just rolled off my tongue. Gone was the guilt-ridden mess of the night before. I was a machine, efficient, compartmentalized. Work became both torture and my salvation. Alex and I, we were a team now, not just office banter, but stolen glances, secret smiles that no one else could see. We were getting reckless, and I was getting good at it, at being someone I didn't recognize. Then came the work trip, a conference, supposedly. I packed practical clothes, but my lingerie bag told a different story. We booked a tiny, discreet hotel off the highway, and that first kiss, it wasn't an accident. Nothing was. The hesitation, the lingering glances, it had all been leading up to this. My whole body hummed, guilty and alive and so damn far away from who I was supposed to be. That night, well, let's just say it's not the boring details of project budgets that keep me up late anymore. I knew, even as we untangled in those cheap hotel sheets, that I'd crossed some irrevocable line. I was a cliché, the bored housewife, the midlife crisis, all of it. There's a bitter kind of humor in that. Coming home was brutal. Paul, in those faded sweatpants he always wears, looked even more domestic. The lies stuck in my throat, but he didn't notice. He's not an idiot. He's just checked out. And maybe that's what stings worse than any guilt. The problem is, I'm different now. I look at him dishing out his bland cereal, and I feel impatient. No, worse than that. I feel nothing. Before, Paul's dullness was a comfortable blanket. Now, it's suffocating. Every minute ticks by, and I'm counting the seconds until I can see Alex again. Can fool myself into thinking that this feeling, this recklessness, has an expiration date. I keep telling myself it's temporary, a bump in the road. I even try to convince myself I'm doing it for Paul, snapping him out of his complacency. But yeah, even I don't buy that load of crap anymore. Because the truth, the one I can barely admit, is that I'm kind of enjoying this fall from grace. The office became our playground. Hidden glances across the conference room table, stolen coffee breaks that stretched into long lunches, hushed whispers in the quiet moments when everyone else was gone. It was like some intoxicating game, this double life I was leading. Paul was none the wiser, still rambling about his fantasy football team while I sat across the dinner table, my mind a million miles away with Alex. Here's the thing about forbidden fruit. It tastes so much sweeter. Suddenly, Alex wasn't just some office flame. He was my escape. He introduced me to his friends, young, ambitious, carefree. It was like stepping into a world where the baggage of mortgages and a decade-long marriage didn't exist. With every sip of too expensive champagne, that world felt more tempting, my reality with Paul fading into a blurry mess. The pressure started, subtly at first. Alex murmuring about possibilities, about what this could be. I'd laugh it off, blame it on the late nights and the stress. But late at night, alone with the accusing silence of our bedroom, I'd let the words sink in, leaving Paul. It felt impossible, terrifying, and kind of exhilarating. A part of me, the sensible part one was clinging to, knew it was crazy. But the sensible part was getting quieter, drowned out by the hum of what ifs. What if my life could be exciting again? What if someone actually wanted me, not just the comfortable idea of me? The guilt would hit me in flashes. Seeing Paul's clueless smile, I felt a sick twist in my stomach. But then, the resentment would kick in. How dare he take me for granted? How dare he become so safe, so boring that I'd been driven to this? The anger became a shield, and man, did that feel powerful. My friendship with Sarah suffered. She's always been my rock, but suddenly her probing questions and genuine concern felt suffocating. I lied, made excuses about work, anything to keep her at arm's length. The guilt wasn't enough to outweigh the fear of being caught, of her looking at me with that disappointed pity I saw in my own reflection. Then, Alex had to go and up the ante, flowers at my desk, a grand gesture that made a few too many people stare. The thrill of it was undeniable, of having this secret out in the open, if only in a vague, flirtatious way. But the thrill was mixed with sheer terror. The whispers started, subtle at first, glances in hallways, hushed conversations that cut short as I approached. I was constantly on edge, paranoia making me see suspicion everywhere. Each night ended in a panicked scroll through my phone, dreading the discovery text, the email to Paul that would shatter everything. My old life, with all its imperfections, was crumbling away. With each lie, each reckless rendezvous, I was sawing through the bridges built back to normalcy. And somehow, the wreckage felt more like liberation than loss. That damn photo. A blurry shot of Alex and me at that hotel bar, his arm draped around me a little too casually, landed on my desk like a bomb. The color drained from my face, and I swear, for a split second, the office seemed to tilt on its axis. Somehow, I managed to shove it in my bag before my knees gave out. Fear, pure, gut-wrenching fear, replaced the thrill of stolen moments. This was no longer a game. This was someone else's twisted design. My mind raced, a desperate search for who, for why. The questions a relentless onslaught in my skull. Confronting Alex was a blur. His denial sounded almost convincing. But there it was, flickering in his eyes, fear matching my own. Whoever sent that photo knew. They were watching. And they had the power to dismantle this whole messy charade with the click of a button. I tried, I really did, to slip back into the role of dedicated wife. Paul was so blissfully unaware. It would have been the perfect escape if I didn't feel like I was crawling out of my skin. Every kind word, every touch, felt like another nail in the coffin of who I used to be. Alex, that feeling, it clung to me like a damn shadow. The obsession started then. Every coworker, every acquaintance was suddenly a suspect. My once routine life became an endless loop of suspicion. My work suffered, the smiles strained and insincere. I avoided everyone, terrified that one misstep would reveal the guilt I desperately tried to hide. Then came the email, vague, no evidence, just sly insinuations that Paul surely couldn't miss. My breath caught in my throat as I clicked send. My finger trembling over the confirmation. It was done. My fate was out of my hands, and all that was left was the agonizing wait. That night, I watched him with a newfound dread. He scrolled mindlessly through his phone, oblivious to the digital landmine in his inbox. Every time he looked up, my heart hammered against my ribs. Was that it? The moment my lies imploded? Luck, or some dark twist of fate, was on my side. He set the phone down, none the wiser, and I felt this surge of twisted relief wash over me. And just like that, a new plan took root. I vowed, to myself, to the empty silence of the room, that this was the end of it. The email would disappear before Paul's morning coffee. Alex would be a ghost, a regrettable mistake I'd desperately shove out of mind. But even as I typed in the password, a bitter certainty settled over me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Breaking up with your affair partner? Not exactly one of those Hallmark card moments. Alex didn't take it well. One minute, he was pathetically pleading, promising to change, to disappear. The next, his voice turned icy, veiled threats hanging heavy in the air. His desperation mirrored my own, and somewhere in that, I saw just how ugly this had gotten. Paul, ever the oblivious optimist, noticed my shift in mood but chalked it up to stress. Every concerned question, every attempt at drawing me out, became another white-hot wave of resentment. Here he was, so clueless and content in his safe little world, while I was unraveling at the seams. Alex played his next hand. Voicemails, pleading and then accusatory, filled my phone each morning. Flowers arrived, not at home. No, but at the damn office. The delivery guy's smirk when he handed them over made me want to crawl out of my skin. Every ring of my phone, every whispered conversation, made that knot in my stomach tighten. He was losing control and taking me down with him. The second email, it arrived like a death sentence, bolder, cruder, and impossible to ignore. Panic clawed at my throat. I spun some absurd story about a disgruntled ex-employee, hoping against hope that Paul would buy it. His frown deepened, the first real crack in the facade of normalcy. My survival now depended on playing the role of perfect wife. Every conversation became a calculated act, every smile stretched a little too wide. Paul's attempts at concern felt like prodding, my skin crawling where his touch used to bring comfort. I was an imposter in my own home, teetering on the edge of exposure at all times. Sarah, bless her, tried to pull me back in after weeks of ghosting her. The guilt of it choked me, the shame of what I'd become cutting deeper than any direct confrontation ever could. Yet, every time her name flashed on my phone screen, my hand clenched reflexively. I couldn't afford the risk, not even from someone as dear as her. Sleep became my enemy. Each night, the panic attacks hit, my body waging the war my mind refused to fight. I was a walking contradiction, a meticulously organized mess, a bundle of nerves in a freshly pressed suit. The line between survival and utter collapse blurred. The woman I saw in the mirror was a stranger, a liar, a desperate woman on the verge of losing it all. The thrill, the excitement, poof, gone in an instant, replaced by a bone-deep chill I couldn't shake. You know, in those movies, right before the big disaster, how things get eerily quiet. That was my life the moment before I walked through the front door. No sounds of the TV, no clatter of dishes, just silence, ringing in my ears like a warning. He was gone. The suitcase, neatly packed and waiting by the door, wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation, a cold, hard slap of reality I should have seen coming. There were no hurled accusations, no tearful shouting matches. That would have been easier to bear, somehow. Instead, this emptiness, it felt like a punishment worse than any rage. The third email, I hadn't even dared to check, a useless attempt to maintain a thread of control in this whole mess. Now it didn't matter. He'd seen it, the irrefutable proof of my betrayal laid bare. Sarah arrived first, a whirlwind of worry and confusion, her presence a lifeline in a house that suddenly felt foreign. Paul had called her, a panicked plea for help that brought her rushing over. Confession poured out of me, words I never thought I'd say aloud, messy, shameful, delivered in a raw burst between sobs. Her reaction took me by surprise. No judgment, no pity, just a quiet strength as she held me together while I fell apart. She became my anchor in those first bewildering hours, fetching tissues, making tea I couldn't drink, offering a presence more comforting than words. For weeks, Paul's absence felt like a hollow ache. Each day was a battle against the suffocating silence. Sarah was there for it all, coaxing me to eat, forcing me to shower, dragging me out of the house when the walls started closing in. She became my lifeline, my only connection to the world I had so thoroughly destroyed. Then, the official blow, the divorce papers. Cold, impersonal, a legal severing that stung more than any emotional outburst could have. Paul was truly done, and the indifference of it shredded what was left of my pride. In a fit of desperation, I tried to reach Alex. The pathetic hope that he'd help fix it. I knew it was futile even as I dialed. His number, disconnected. Another ghost in the wreckage of my life. Sarah, patient and steady as always, was the one who brought the final twist of the knife. The emails, the photos, it hadn't been some random act of revenge. It was her, a misguided, twisted attempt at protecting me, at forcing Paul to see what he was neglecting. Sarah, my loyal friend whom I'd cut out and hurt, had been the architect of my downfall. The shock was paralyzing. Anger came later, but in that moment, I felt nothing but the cold, creeping realization of just how truly alone I was. Sarah was gone, the door shut quietly behind her, and the slam echoed in the newfound silence, more deafening than any scream. Betrayal, at least from Alex, I'd almost expected, but from her that cut a wound deeper than the affair itself. I was alone, properly alone, and suddenly, the vast emptiness of our house felt like a fitting punishment. My new best friend, a bottle of cheap vodka that sat accusingly on the kitchen counter, offering the only solace I could stomach. Sleep was a blur of alcohol-soaked nightmares, waking a jarring symphony of headaches and stomach-churning regret. Just when I thought I'd hit the absolute bottom, Mr. Hotshot himself reappeared. Alex, ever the opportunistic vulture, slithered back with messages of support, whispered promises of a fresh start together. My rock bottom, as it turned out, was simply another level to fall in his eyes. It was the slap of clarity I desperately needed. Underneath the concerned words was predatory glee. How deliciously pathetic I must have looked to him. A letter arrived, nestled between credit card bills and takeout menus I didn't have the energy to throw away. Paul's lawyer, outlining the divorce settlement. Generous, almost absurdly so, given what I deserved. A flicker of something sparked through the haze. Maybe his indifference wasn't absolute. Maybe there was a shred of the Paul the first used to know still in there. Somewhere, it was a pathetic crumb of hope, and I clung to it. The office, once my domain, now felt like a crime scene. Word traveled fast, I knew. The glances in the grocery store, the whispered gossip that cut short whenever I walked by. There was no escaping the spectacle I'd made of myself. The pity was worse than the judgment. They all saw the wreck I'd become, the shattered pieces of a woman they used to, well, they used to respect me, or at least tolerate me. I resigned, a cowardly email to my boss, the few hastily fabricated excuses. The thought of facing their stares, their questions, the mix of disgust and morbid curiosity, it was too much. This city, once my life, had become a cage. Months went by, packing a single suitcase didn't feel like escape so much as surrender. A small, quiet town somewhere where my name wasn't attached to scandal was my destination. It wasn't some noble new beginning, it was retreat. On a whim, a stupid, self-destructive whim, I stopped by Paul's old office. Changed, remodeled, new faces stared out from the lobby I used to breeze through. It was a sharp reminder, just another one, that the world hadn't stopped spinning because I destroyed mine. Life went on, with or without me, and maybe, just maybe, that tiny sliver of hope was the dumbest delusion of all.